So this is a special podcast done in not a special way. It's via Zoom. The amount of troubles I've had. But no, this podcast is with the writer of the Beatles Reference Book, Jerry Hammack. So here it is.
Okay, so I'll just do to my multiple cameras. I'll talk to my multiple cameras here. So first of all, thank you very much for doing this.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Because I've watched you on many interviews on YouTube, because I Googled a lot as I'm researching. Yeah, and I've seen a lot, and they last quite a while. And I've watched, no, that's not a bad thing. I've watched, it's not bad.
Maybe not for you.
But I've watched pretty much all of them all the way through, but I did watch Dr. Mitz's all the way through because I watched his videos anyway.
Oh,
yeah.
Claudio is such a good guy.
Yeah.
I just love that guy. A very unexpected friendship, and just super cool guy.
Yeah, he's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I came onto him pretty early. He was like demonstrating like Fairchild limiters, and I actually learned a lot from him. I mean, I learned to be really fearless when it comes to playing with audio gear and figuring out what it does. If you watch him, he'll throw a signal in and he'll just go, "What's this do?" Bam! And he'll just max it out to see like, oh, on the high end, it does all of this. And then he kind of finds the subtlety and the sweet spot of the tools that he uses, but he's fearless. And I just love that about the guy. He's just a good guy too. So
I know, and there's nothing wrong with putting stuff on and blowing it up, in my opinion. I've done that many times, but probably shouldn't admit that. I'm just like, what's this?
No, it's how you know. It's always good to find. It's good to find the edges. It's good to find where things break. It's good in music and in audio to find out how far you can move the needle and where it doesn't make sense anymore to move the needle, because that's where you start to learn again that sweet spot of this tool's really appropriate for this kind of sound. And I also know if I want to really muck it up, that I can push this one, whereas this one, if I push it, not liking that at all. So, and that's the only way is to look at the extremes of these audio tools that we all use. I think there's a timidity that a lot of like YouTube producers and mixers push of, just tap that compression just a little bit, 1 or 2 dBs. And sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes you only want to just knock off a little bit or just give some subtle EQing or that. But you'll find a lot of pros will push these things. Why use it if you're not going to hear it is another, is kind of the inverse philosophy around that. And I
think people are scared to do it. So because they're like, if I use it a tiny bit, like compression, only compression actually, if I use it a tiny bit, then I can't go wrong. Because if I overdo it, someone's going to say, "Oh my God, why have you done that?" Compared to if someone doesn't,
there's you would think in this time of the of global connectedness, and also this time of like just the massive amount of music that's being made by all sorts of different people. Granted, a lot of it, but a lot of it, really cool too. You'd think there'd be more of a acceptance in the audio engineering and producing community of a variety of approaches, but there's a homogeneity to the approaches that I don't think necessarily serves the music. I think it keeps you from finding your unique sound, your unique tone, the signature that you can bring to music, and learning to use tools, the fundamentals of learning to use tools, everyone's got to get there. I mean, that's the baseline. But once you're there, then it's time for you to explore what makes sense for your sound, what you think sounds good. And if that means that you're either really pushing these things, or that in your application you want things so organic and so loose and real that you're not going to push those things, that starts to become your signature. And there's no one way to do it. There's no one right way to do it. And yeah, so there, I'll climb down off of that soapbox for a bit.
I'll just show the book, because I bought your first book, because there are, here it is, everyone. I'll show the multiple cameras. There you go. And there are 5 versions of this book, aren't there? Am I correct?
5 volumes. Yeah. So not 5 versions of the same 5 book, volumes. 5 different volumes.
Yeah, could you imagine? You couldn't decide on the front cover, so you thought I'll just do different ones.
Yeah, like the new McCartney album, right?
Yeah.
Buy 5 versions of the same book.
Yeah.
So the first book covers 1961 through 64. So My Bonnie through Beatles for Sale. The second one covers Help through Revolver. The third one covers Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour. The fourth one is pretty much exclusively the White Album, but there was a release of the Yellow Submarine soundtrack during that era, and only one track that was actually recorded in that era that ended up on the soundtrack, which was Hey Bulldog, and a little orchestral recording work that was done by George Martin. And then the final volume is, which has just been released, is Let It Be and Abbey Road, that final era. And the idea behind the books is to take you through the recording process from the first take to the remix that was used in it, that was used for release. And the books, I hope, do serve as reference manuals, meaning there's lots of different ways that you can go through the information, and that can be on your understanding level or your comfort level or your interest level. So there's a narration of the song from, again, first take to remix. There's diagrams that you can follow, kind of the milestones of the recording process, and see how they built the song on tape. And then there's session by session. So every single recording session, I detail the work that was done in the session, who participated in it, all of the instruments and amplification that was used for it, and then all of the studio tools that were used for it. So there's lots of different ways that you can slice it depending on your interest. And I also, rather than have it be like a linear sort of narration of the songs coming together, and Holly, from your work in the studio, that you don't always work just from song from start to finish. Sometimes you'll be working on an album or an EP project, and you'll do the backing track for all of the tracks on one day, and then the next day you're involved with doing some like bass overdubs or vocal overdubs, and you might hit 2 of them. And so rather than do that, I follow just each individual song from top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom. And I didn't want people to have to jump around the book and go, when did they do the backing track on that? And what did they work on in that? And why does this make sense now? It's too confusing. So try to figure out a way that would make complex information easy to get through.
I quite liked the bit that drew me to it was how you've broken down the actual channels and the tracks and the guitar tracks and stuff like that, so I can visually see what I'm looking at, because I'm quite a visual person. I don't like, and that was literally, I flicked through, I bought the book because I thought, okay, I've got to buy a book that is a reference to something that people recorded in the 60s. So I thought, okay, I'm going to Google this, and I found this, and then I went through it, and I thought, the first page I flicked on was that, and I thought, oh my gosh, I could literally just see what they've done straight away. And
Yeah.
that to me, it was exactly what I was looking for. And that's why,
cool.
So I was like, this is the book.
Oh,
And
I'm glad. Yeah, that was the idea, or one of the ideas was I knew that these would be of value to like really deep Beatles fans, people that are, got their headphones on and they're trying to figure out, what's going on back there? Am I hearing some maracas? Is that a tambourine that they've muted, or what's going on back there? And I knew that like deep Beatles fans would like that, but I also knew that there was a community of producers and engineers out there, they're doing this work either for a living or as an avocation, that might be interested in knowing how this stuff comes together, how this work came together, and how they did it in the early days, and then how that evolved. I'm visual too, so the diagrams they also helped me as I was analyzing what was happening, because what you hear in stereo when you're talking about the days of mono, twin, or not mono, because mono is just one place, but we're talking about the days of twin track, 3-track, 4-track, 8-track, and on. What you end up hearing in stereo, there turns out there can only ever be a handful of ways that was constructed in order for you to be able to hear it the way that you are hearing it. Mm. And so that helped me, diagramming helped me break that down of what possibly could happen or had to have happened for them to move from one state of the song to the next state to the finished state. And so I mean, I love diagrams. I've diagrammed songs from when I was a kid. Before I ever owned a multi-track, I dreamed of owning a multi-track. And I think I was aware of like the Beatles and other artists that they had done multi-track recording very early. Like I'm thinking 10, 11, 12, something like that, years of age. I was aware that like that's how recordings got made. It wasn't, some spot of, there's one room and they've got all of these instruments and all these singers and orchestra and all that. I mean, I knew that they were assembled somehow. Mm-hmm. And I learned about, multi-track. And so when I was a little kid and I was dreaming of making music and recording, I would do drawings of my songs that I hadn't written yet, but this rock song I'm going to do, and it'll have 2 guitar players and a bass player and oh, wait a minute, I'm going to run out of tape. I need to move that to this channel. I was doing that crap when I was a little kid. And so, basically I've been doing stuff that ended up in these books for a better part of my life, because it just helps me understand like what's going on. When you're producing, it's really important to be able to look ahead. And back in the day when I was working with tape in studios, you had to have that kind of planning in mind. You had to know the arrangement that you were looking to bring to life, and the decisions are very consequential when you have limited tracks. And so you had to plan ahead. So all that ended up serving me in all sorts of ways to
because this book really helped me in the fact that I was set to do so they basically set us an assignment to say, go off and research whatever genre you want to do, and go and find out and do it in that specific way. Okay. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I could literally do it in cheap, but I thought, okay, no, I'm going to find something that's going to help me to try and do it exactly the way they did it in a sort of modern way, because I'm very modern and I don't know how many channels of stuff. I just think, oh, we'll make a new channel, I just put it on. it's fine, we'll just make a new channel,
Sure.
And this was, I made a rule that I'm going to stick to, and I said I'm going to record on 4 tracks and 4 channels, and then I'm going to bounce that out and then not touch it at all, and then do more and then bounce that out and not touch it. And I found it quite difficult because I was like, oh my gosh, I was over analyzing everything, thinking, oh, if I muck this up, I can't go back and touch it. And the band that I was doing it with as well trusted me to do it and said, yeah, we trust you, you go ahead. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I get it wrong, then there's no touch up. It was quite tricky.
There isn't, but there is. I mean, and even in the era of the Beatles, there was, and so they would do these tape reduction remixes. They're filled up the 4-track and they're going from tape to tape, and they would do multiple mixes. You'll see those tape reductions go from, sometimes they might do up to 10 tape reduction remixes, where they're trying to get everything just right. Because as you noted, you're committing at that point. You're making a lot of commitments. You're committing to equalization. You're committing to the grouping of instruments. You're committing to volume balancing in all of that. And then when you add on to that, you're stuck with it. But they didn't always get that right the first time around. They sorted that out themselves. The idea is behind that is that the commitments that you make are now the foundation of the work that you move forward on. It really does color your thinking of what I need to do next, what should happen next, how does this arrangement fill itself out now that this becomes the baseline. When you start recording, a song, the backing track is the baseline, whatever that happens to be, a full band or just a piano and a drum, whatever it is, that's the baseline, and you build up your song on top of that. Yeah. When you're doing tape reductions, now that you've got that backing track, and I've added a couple of guitars and I've added my bass and whatever. Now that's the new baseline, and everything you do has to be responsive to that, because you don't get to do that again. Making those commitments is nerve-wracking if you're not used to doing it, and a lot of modern engineers grow up with the luxury of not having to do it. They can I'll wait and I'll deal with that. And when it comes to the mix, I'll make those kind of decisions. But I think if you really want to be an effective producer, even if you don't literally do these things, commitments are super important. I work more and more with like virtual instruments and things, virtual keyboards in particular. And I love it. I mean, I couldn't afford the synths that I get to use now, right? I've got, like a lot of people out, and maybe yourself included, I've got now my like perfect emulation of a $200,000 Fairlight CMI. Makes me so happy, right? Just stuff that I drooled over when I was a kid, and I would never get a chance to touch or work with, and now I can work with it and record it. I've got, again, like most people that work with virtual instruments, I have 40 pianos probably, right? But when I'm recording with these, so I've got 40 pianos, but when I'm doing the work, I choose a piano. I choose a piano out of those 40 that works with this track, and I'll record it, as a MIDI track. I'll do whatever sort of tweaking and correcting I might want to do. I rarely quantize anything. I do this all kind of by hand and ear. I don't like quantizing. In general, I really don't like it. I'm not a fan. I like to. I think it comes with a point of
feeling as well, because I can sort of know when something's supposed to be in a certain way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll as I do, I'll jump on a sidecar here. A friend of mine, this fantastic blues guitarist out of Chicago that I worked with in the 90s. He said to me when we were working on a track one day, and I was like, man, he's such a slippery guitar player. I was like, you know, I said, I love the way that you work around, that you work around the groove. And he said, Jerry, the groove isn't on the beat. The groove is before the beat and it's after the beat. And I was like, oh. That just like, that stuck in my head for from that point in whatever that was, 1991 till this day, of like, it's these, where you have feel in music is where the musician works with the groove, not tied to the groove, but works with it. Now, sometimes working with it means that you are spot on to the beat, but feel is found in those, and we're talking not gigantic intervals, on or off the beat, but there's just enough to say I'm anticipating it, or I'm letting it be heavy. Ringo was a really was a heavy drummer. He was always a little bit long and late while still being in time. So those are kind of the characteristics, right? And that's what makes it feel heavy and solid, is I'm not just pop, 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 pop in with a click. I am working my way through that. And when you quantize, you're mathematically locked to, to the beat per minute value, whatever that happens to be. And for certain, genres of music, EDM, that's what you want to do. That's the nature of that genre. But with what I do with pop and rock and roll, one of the requirements of that type of music is the human element. And the human element is found in imperfection, not perfection. And imperfection is what you don't know that you're hearing, but it's right around the beat. It's not on the beat. So yeah, I use all the tools. I correct my MIDI. I'll use the time warping tools to bring things closer in. But when I'm doing those kinds of corrections, I am unifying an organic performance as opposed to being rigid to a grid.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to unify a performance. And sometimes I want to hear that. I want to hear that anticipate it. Sometimes I want to hear it lag it. And if that's not quite happening, then I will use the tools to make that happen. But I don't like just mathematically gridding things. No. It's for the type of music that I do. It's rarely useful. Okay, now back on track.
We'll go back on track. Yeah, I have a question about. So, how did you find all the information that you needed for all of these books? Because I remember, I think you said in one of your interviews that it was 10 years of collective work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the primary sources were Mark Lewison, Andy Babbitt's Beatles gear gave it's not complete, but it's good. Ryan and Hughes recording the Beatles. These were kind of fundamental texts, but what I did was I tracked down all of the Beatles audio that I could possibly find, which ended up being over 5,000 tracks of audio. And those were, obviously lots of bootleg releases. And I was able to then hear the songs at different stages and also hear different mixes that would reveal different elements in the songs. So all of that, plus I collected probably close to all of the archival photographs that were available for the Beatles working in the studios. So you could see what was what was involved. And other Beatle geeks have done a lot to identify at least a pocket of a date pocket around a lot of this activity. And so again, all of these things, all of that starts to come together. And now when you know the configuration of a studio, EMI Recording Studios, Studio 2 in 1964. I know the gear that the studio had acquired and had available at that point in its life. So that's the work gear that they're working with. Mm-hmm. I know, and I know that that's gear accessible in this studio at this day. Now, who's engineering it and producing it? If I know particularly the balance engineer, if I know who the balance engineer is, and I know the balance engineer's preferences for recording, now I can know things like microphone selection. Norman Smith's microphone selection was unique from Jeff Emmerich's microphone selection, which was unique from Ken Scott's microphone selection. The kind of the big primary, different from Glenn Johns' microphone selection. So knowing those things, knowing what instruments they had in their possession, amplifiers they had in their possession in that era that they were working with. If you take all of those components now, photographic evidence, audio evidence, documentary evidence, interviews that I was lucky enough to be able to have a number of talks with Richard Langham, what they're the earliest tape operators who watched it all go down. Ken Scott. You learn about the mindset behind making music at EMI at the time. Taking all those things then, and you have to line them up. And if you can get them lined up, now you understand the story of how the songs came together. The final layer on that is, as we were discussing earlier, is when push comes to shove, there's only a handful of ways that the songs can be constructed over time that has them turn out with what you hear in the finished mix. So I'm not talking about the modern mixes by like Giles Martin. I'm talking about the original stereo mixes. There's only a handful of ways these things can happen. And once you understand that, then again, I've lined up the environment, the people that are working in the environment, their preferences, gear available, amplification available, microphone selections, state of the song, all of those things aligned gives you the story of how the songs came together. And gathering all of that information, photographic, documentary information, interviews, anything that was written that I could trust, and there isn't a lot of that, and lining it up, that took a decade.
Did you have any special sort of access? Did you go and visit the Abbey Road studios?
No, I didn't. Abbey Road's a working studio. They're kind of protective of their legacy. I don't know if that's bad. They didn't have a stake in this, and who am I? Right? Who am I that they would give me access? I've had positive interactions with the folks at EMI or at Abbey Road. Mm-hmm. I've had positive interactions with the folks at Apple. Again, I look at it from who am I that they would give me those things, but I haven't had and later on, I was actually, I wish he was, I wish he was there now. I've had time with like Ken Townsend, who used, ran the studio. I think if Ken Townsend was at the studio now, I'd get into the studio. I'd get access. If Ken never sees this, he'd be like, no, not a chance. It's really, there's enough solid information, and again, going back to the documentary stuff, John Barrett's tape logs, the work of John C. Wynn to document all the bootlegs and stuff that was done. There's enough assets out there that if you are a good detective, you understand how to work forward and work backward to get an answer. You can sort these things out, and again, then just given time. And it was not easy to do, and it was part of the reason I started doing this was I would work with artists that would ask me the same sort of questions that like you might get asked by your clients of, can you get me McCartney's bass sound? Can you get me Harrison's guitar sound? And you're like, and you always say yes.
I'll try.
No, I would say, oh, sure.
But okay. Yes, I'll go and do some research.
Exactly. You do research, and then you find, oh man, then you find that not all the sources agree. Some people really act like they know what they're talking about, and you find that they don't know anything, or they're working from obsolete information. And I happen to have some time on my hands about over 11 years ago now, where I started to answer some of those questions I got all the time. And then as I started doing that, it's like, why don't I just kind of, it'd be kind of interesting to know how these songs came together. And I don't see anywhere where someone has told me how the songs were actually, came together. Lewison's work, while it gave you the blow by blow, it gave you the blow by blow in just an outline form of day in the studio. They recorded, they did overdubs to this, they did backing track for this, they did, or takes 1 through blah, blah, blah of this, they did overdubs on this, they did mono mixing, they did stereo mixing on these songs. That's fine. But then in the narrative of those things, sometimes he would tell you about what happened, and sometimes, and you've seen all my interviews, so I apologize that I'm being repetitive for you.
Not for anyone else. Everyone's like, oh yeah, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember him saying it.
Yeah, but sometimes he would follow like the story of, that's the day that Lennon comes in '67 high on acid to do a Sgt. Pepper session, and he's not getting anything done, and Martin thinks, you look a little bit ill, why don't you go up on the roof and get some air? And he follows that story. Martin sends him up on the roof, the band comes in and they're like, where's John? Oh, I sent him up on the roof to get some air. They're like, on the roof, you might jump. That's a way more interesting story than they did, 7 vocal overdubs on Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite or something, right? It's just way more interesting. So those stories like that Lewison told, that the biographers have told, those weren't my stories. That isn't the whole that I found in the Beatles narrative. The whole in the narrative was, how were the songs made? And the handful of books out there that even attempted it, like All the Songs is one of them. They were out of date. They were inaccurate. They weren't rigorous. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, this has to stand up to scrutiny. And so, mercifully now, with these books have been out for a few years, some of them have been out for a few years now. And I've, again, heard from people that were either involved one way or another, or or people that really know how this work was done. And no one's come back to me and said,
what's he on about?
Yeah, what's he on about? Yeah, I have not had that. I've not had that feedback, and that tells me that I have done the work carefully, and hopefully I've done it right. I do not pretend to know it all. You'll probably have noticed in the books that if I don't have an answer for something, I will say we don't know. We can't know. From all of the evidence that we have access to, we can't know the answer to some of these things, and that's just the way it is. And I try to make that very, very plain. Robert Rodriguez, a friend of mine, a really great Beatles author, he talks about the knowable and the unknowable. And sometimes the knowable takes a lot of digging, and I did that. I dug for what we could know and what I could know and share. But some of these things we will never, we'll never know. It's lost to time. People that want to criticize this will say, well, why couldn't you? And I will always come back and say, what were you doing at age 22 on November 19th? Tell me what you did on November 19th, 2001. What were you doing that day? I can't remember the recording sessions that I've participated on. Right?
No, I've got figures of like things in my head, but I can't remember every single thing I did. Like
no one, no one can. And we're so lucky that the studio processes at EMI were such that in the era required documentation of things. Right? They did it for expense reasons. They did it for organizational reasons because it was a highly structured environment. If you were going into a session, you had to specify as the engineer, like, okay, we've booked the Beatles for Tuesday, and so it's a Beatles session. What are they working on? The producer will say, oh, we're gonna need a piano. We're gonna do some piano. We're gonna do, and then the backing band. And they go, oh, okay. So they would have to draw out what was in the studio. I want a piano here with this microphone. I want the drums set up here with a screen and these microphones. Guitar cabinets over here with these microphones on them. They had to specify all those things in writing, and those are in the record of EMI Studios. We have a lot of that. We have a lot of that stuff. Now, again, I didn't have full access to these things, but once you know what they were using, and now I know that this is what would be a good example? Oh, it's a session on the Hard Day's Night album, which was recorded in a fairly compact. It was two kind of compact sections of work that they were doing on, with a little break in between, I think, for some touring that they did. I know it's a Norman Smith session. I know Norman Smith uses, in this era, was using Neumann U48 microphones on the guitar cabinets. He would, but he would occasionally also use a U48 on John's cabinet and a KM56 on George's cabinet for some differentiation, because they use the exact same guitar cabinet. So you would use that to get some different coloration. So I know it's a Norman Smith session. I know it's recording guitars. I know it's in Studio 2. They didn't reinvent the wheel. This is the thing that I learned from, especially from Richard Langham, was we're running 3 sessions a day in 3 studios, and the goal of it is to come out with product on the back end. So you don't go in and go like, oh, what are we going to do today? Oh, that'd be fun to try that D19C on the bass today. No.
They're organized and they have set
They
layouts. Yeah.
they knew what they were doing, and they did that. They were in the business of making records and having them consistently sound good. And so because of that, we know, and because of that, and once we know the preferences of engineers, it becomes pretty straightforward to specify, if you're recording a guitar cabinet with this engineer in this era, it's this microphone.
So speaking of like a layout sort sense, what would they usually, so their first sort of sessions that they did, what was their layout of drums, guitar? How would they lay it out? Because they did it live sort of takes, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by layout?
So where would the drums sit in the corner of the room in a specific location with specific, so stuff like that.
And this is all, like with any studio setup, this is all based on experience. You learn over a period of time that if I'm working in Studio X, let's say at EMI, that I'm working in Studio 2, that this particular corner is, sounds best for drums. So we're setting up a full drum kit. It's always set up over here. Bass is always set up over here. We bring the guitar cabinets, typically sound best here in the heart of the room. That sort of thing. That comes from experience. And the typical layout at like Studio 2, if anyone has this visually in their head, is if you're looking at it from the control room, basis, you have the stairs on the right. And then so back to the left corner of Studio 2 would be the drums and McCartney's bass cabinet baffled off. The drums were not baffled off forward. They had a back baffle. So they had a little drum screen, but it was behind Ringo, not in front of Ringo. It wasn't to keep his sound from getting out into the room. It was to keep it from bouncing oddly off of the back corner. And then in front of him would be the Vox amplifiers on chairs or stands in front of him, and the microphones pointed back at Ringo. And now in Norman Smith's era, there were no gobos, there were no screens that were trying to isolate the sound of cabinets or isolate the cabinets from the drums. He liked it kind of live, and to reinforce that, Smith would also use a U47 on Omni, the Neumann U47 mic set to Omni, back in the room a spell to get the overall feel of Studio 2 there. And if you listen to his, particularly with the Beatles album and recordings, they have this vibe to them, this kind of live vibe to them, that's all about the fact that you've got all this crosstalk between microphones going on.
Because I'm interested to find out from you about the Waves Abbey Road plugins and what you think of them.
People at Abbey Road who helped develop these with Waves, if they are standing behind the sound of these and saying and telling us, because I understand your point of marketing, but I take reputations like really seriously, and you only get one chance to be reputationally bankrupt, right? You only have one chance for us as consumers to find out you lied to us, and then you don't get any other chances. Yeah. So that these were developed in conjunction with Abbey Road. The fact that Waves is known on a number of fronts outside of their work with Abbey Road to have excellent modeling technology, so software modeling of analog gear. That they're known to have that they developed them hand in hand with Abbey Road. That A/B comparisons by Abbey Road engineers have, the reports back from them is, I can't tell the difference. That's all I need to know.
I've swapped laptops. So, because that's converting the recording. So I was like, oh, no, I'll just do another laptop. I'll just use it.
Oh, there you go. That's great. That's funny.
So how do you think the Beatles have influenced like other genres of music, in specifically indie rock? Trying to reach for the answer.
It's a really good question. I think the Beatles, because I guess on the songwriting side, they had such a wide palette of music that they created. I think it kind of gave permission for indie rock. Not gave permission. That's the wrong way to express it, or not an accurate way to express it. I think the continuing influence is it provides a lot of freedom. When you hear such a range of music coming out of a single act, starting with the Beatlemania stuff and the Please Please Me through Hard Day's Night, of this kind of great kind of group music through that, and then peeling off into the experimental stuff that started happening with really with Help, when they added just guitar and strings for Yesterday, and then moving into Revolver, where kind of all bets were off with, think of Andrew Bird Can Sing, or She Said, or Tomorrow Never Knows. That whole range, the psychedelia Pepper, the complicated, like super complicated, but like more down to earth sounding White Album, and then this just beautiful finish that they went through post Let It Be, jumping back to just the roots of their rock and roll, or at least they attempted to. Few notable exceptions, of course, but that whole range, I think, gives independent artists, influences them in a number of ways, depending on where they hear the Beatles reflected in their own sensibilities. There's just a rich well to draw from the Beatles to influence you, and that's been the case, since forever with them. Think about the punk and the new wave, where an artist, where you had I think one of the best examples is Elvis Costello. Elvis starts with this really great, simple, straightforward rock that you could just as easily point at Please Please Me, that he's doing very direct, very very tight. And then he ventures off into Imperial Bedroom and the Great American Songbook and stuff that's more kind of like the way McCartney kind of embraced show tunes and stuff that they listened to. Yeah. I think those are all at least sideways references and influences from the Beatles. So I think the biggest influence that Beatles have on independent music, independent artists, is to tell a story of there are a number of ways that you can make great music, and a number of profiles that great pop music can take. There's no one way that you have to approach this to make compelling pop music. And I think if you understand that and then internalize that, I think it gives you freedom then for your own expression. If my expression happens to be an earnestness that starts with Blackbird by McCartney and ends up in Mumford and Sons, and you know what I mean? Mm. That's one path through it, or in McCartney's later incarnations as a solo artist, Monkberry Moon Delight, or those kinds of things, right? Mm. There's a direct line between Blackbird, and Mumford & Sons.
I mean, to me, the way I look at it is the Beatles are here, and there's like loads of little lines coming out from different like sub-genre umbrella things sort of going on, and they have set the sort of bar for you can do anything, because they are so like versatile in all of their albums, and they've paved the way.
You actually brought up another point that I think is critical to understanding the Beatles. The Beatles were restless musically, and they were highly competitive musically. They never wanted to do the same thing twice, and they always wanted to do something that was new to them. Now their position as the top selling artists of their era, and now, as we know, the top selling artists of all time, gave them the freedom to do that. But we're in an era now making music where we all have, except for just a handful of artists, we all have these kind of micro audiences. We're making music that's heard by a few thousand people in general. There's a handful that reach progressively bigger audiences, and then there, of course, there's a few just mega artists that are out there. But in general, we're making pretty personal music for a group of pretty direct fans. But the great news for the Beatles is that can be your expression. It can be your thing. You can follow your own muse, and if you do that with enough quality, in today's era, there's going to be an audience for you. Again, it might not be a huge audience, but if you're making music for to try to please people, you ain't making the right music. If you're not making music that's true to you, then it's never going to connect. I don't care what it is. It has to be, in this old gray-haired man's opinion, it has to be a personal expression. It has to start from your heart and your intent for it to be of any value to the world. And but you'll likely find that there are some like-minded souls out there that your music will connect to, and in some cases connect very deeply to, if it starts in the right place, if it starts from your heart. You'll find it there. The Beatles they always followed their muse. They always made music that they wanted to make, and we followed along. Now, don't think for a minute they were in their own world, because they weren't. They were of their time. They were of their time. They were within the industry. They were competing with, believe it or not, they're competing with the Monkees. They're competing with Three Dog Night, in the late 60s. They were competing with Jerry and the Pacemakers. They were competing with the Four Seasons in the US. And they're competing with the Beach Boys. They knew that, and they loved some of that music. But what they did, and what we all do, is you take those influences that you love, and they go into the blender of your own musical sensibility. And if you're lucky and you're true to your own voice, it'll never come out as the Beatles or whoever. It'll always come out as you. Now, if your blender doesn't allow you to have an authentic voice, then I heard this quote the other day. I just loved it. It's Elvis Costello. He said he was doing a home interview from Vancouver Island here in Canada, and he said, we all strive and strive and strive until we crash on the shores of our own mediocrity. and I mean, I love that, because I mean, really, that's the challenge, is to get over our own perception of mediocrity. That that these guys are way better, I'll never be there. No, just be yourself. Just do your own thing, and do your own thing to the best of your ability. something else that I typically share, and I'll share with you and whoever might pick this up, is don't ever for a moment believe that you're coming back to this moment in time, because you never will. Mm-hmm. So if you're making music right now, make that music the best music that you can make. Give your heart to it, give your effort to it, give your musicianship to it right now. Because I can tell you from a lifetime of experience, I've been doing this over 30 years, you will rarely, if ever, return to this music in this time. So this is the time to make it. Don't think, I'll do this version of it, but what I really want to make is this version of it. I'll make that down the road. You absolutely will not do that, because you will move on as time moves on and your experience moves on and all of this stuff. You'll never come back to today. So make, whatever you're doing today in making music, give it your focus and your attention, your effort, and make this music that you're making right now the best music you can make. So when you look back on it, even if, and we all do, I look back on work that I did. Well, actually, some of the work I look back on, I was like, wow, did okay. But, you look back on some stuff and you'll be like, well, I could have done that a lot better. Yeah, probably, because your skills grow, your sensibilities grow, your knowledge grows. If you're really into this and this is, how you make your life, that's just natural. But again, you'll never go back. So now's the time to make the music you're making, right now. It's express this moment in your life through your music as fully as you can is always my advice. Don't ever think, and I guess that goes back to our early part of our conversation. Don't think about, I'm going to fix it in the mix. Don't think about, I'll make those decisions later. Make those decisions now, and you will move forward into something really positive for yourself. Make decisions, make choices, make commitments. Actually, did I finish that thought with my 40 pianos? I track, I again, use all the current tools to record them. But when I'm done, I commit that piano. I commit it as audio, and I disable the MIDI, and I don't go back to it.
I think this is the thing when I recorded the stuff 60s wise, it was, for me, I preferred it. Looking back on it, then I was probably, I don't like this. I was stressed. This is very stressful. This is like, oh, no. But now looking back, I'm thinking I paid more attention to detail than I probably normally would. And I'm listening more to the song than I probably normally would, than I like to admit. I'm just sitting there going, press record. And then usually I go, whew, gosh, I've got 3 minutes to sort of relax. But then I was like, no, I haven't, I can't. I've got to think about what I'm actually doing. And yeah, I was constantly panicked, but I wouldn't not do it again.
Well, you get used to, like anything, you get used to making decisions. And I think it's a super positive mindset to do, because you've dealt with it. So here, I'll share with you. I'm working on a session now, and when I'm working on a session, I have documents that I use. When I'm organizing it, I'll put together a worksheet for the song. So I know with this song, in this case, I know the kind of the overall reference that I'm working with, like what's kind of the mood that I want to set with it. And I'll do that based off of another song that I like, maybe, dip back into the 70s. Maybe I want this to be like a Steely Dan, Peg or Hey 19 sort of thing. And based on that, then I'll say, I've got acoustic guitar, electric bass, 2 electric guitars, drums, string section, saxophone, lead vocal, 3 backing vocals, and electric piano. And then I start checking off the list. as I
See, the thing, I think my business partner would really like you, because every single time he says something about writing lists and they should give us what they're doing, they should know what they're doing, we need to write everything down, because I'm like, oh yeah, okay, Ed, yeah, we'll get them to do it, but we never do. But maybe I should take the advice of you and think maybe he's right, that we probably should write things down instead of just.
You're moving forward. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And when it's time to mix, I have a mixing checklist that I go through, and I got pre-mix activities that I do. Everything from the editing that I do, any tuning that I do, gain staging, blah 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 blah, and then to be sure that I've got through all of the equalization and compression, that I've addressed it on across the board, that I'm checking my references, that that I've checked phase issues, blah 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 blah. I'm just not that smart. So I have to keep a checklist to know that I'm working through it to completion. And for me, that gives me a lot of freedom, because I know I'm moving forward. I know I'm moving to the completion of this track. And I also know that if I put a check on that list, I know I've addressed that particular issue. I know I've looked at the drums, and I've looked at the equalization on the drums, and I've looked at the compression on the drums, if necessary. I've applied those changes that I might want to make. I've double checked the gain staging, so I'm not overloading my drum bus now. Now I'm onto my guitars, or now I'm onto my vocals, or whatever. I've de-essed my vocals. I know that I have, so, right? So you're not going like, did I?
Maybe, yeah. I'm like, yeah, maybe I did it. Okay, yeah, I probably did it.
I think I did.
I must say though that your book was very helpful in my
project,
in my 60s recording project.
Good.
Which hopefully it doesn't sound like a load of rubbish, what I've recorded. I think it sounds good.
Well, I mean,
I haven't sent it to the band either, so yeah.
I'd love to hear it if you want to share it. So
I'll send it over to you, and I'll send it, and you can judge it and probably go, oh no.
No. I don't do that. I mean, what I always do in those situations is I listen for, like, what's your intent? What are you trying to do? And hopefully, we've talked about it and I know what you're trying to do. And then, if I'm giving feedback, it's if I'm being a good person, it's to hear in it what you're trying to do, and then to help you get closer to that. If you haven't already nailed it. If you've nailed it, then I'm like, what can I take? What can I steal from her? And what ideas can I steal from her? We all, great thing about all of this is, we do all learn from each other if we take the time to. There's something to be gained at every step of the way. Either as they say, a good example, right? Or a warning. One way or another.
Just show the cameras the book again. It's volume 1, everyone. Not version 1, volume 1, everyone. Volume 1. of a different set of books, everybody. But yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for chatting and
you bet, Holly.
insight to your world. Yeah, it was very fun. Yeah, my nerves didn't get the better of me, so I was quite. I'm relaxed now. So
didn't know you're nervous at all.
Okay.
So best wishes with your future, and don't hesitate to reach out. I'm not.
I'm definitely gonna send you the mix so you can.
I'd love that. Yeah, encourage you. Stay in touch. Congratulations on your dissertation work that you're doing, and on your studio. Super cool that you're doing your own studio. Big challenge in these times, and I'm sure your clients are probably delighted to have you working on their stuff. So
Hope so. Hope so. But thank you very much, and I'll send you over the stuff.
okay,
I'm really appreciative that you've taken your time to talk to me.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Have a great
Jerry.
rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.